Right, morning Heather. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to introduce you as a pioneer of online education, because when I look back, Harrow Online and working with that and founding that and setting that up, and then Highgrove Education, now working with Multi-Academy Trust and going up into Northern India as well, it would seem as well. You're sort of, you're leading the way in a way. So my first question is, if you go back to the start with Harrow, what lessons did you learn there that you've applied to what you're doing now at Highgrove?
Well, thank you for the introduction. I always like the word pioneer. And after that jingly theme tune, so definitely a great start to the podcast. I mean, gosh, working with Harrow School Online and founding that school, it taught me so much. And actually, Highgrove, I'd say, really is a continuation of that school more than anything. With Harrow School Online, we were trying to show that you could translate really high quality independent schooling into an online format. So the idea was that we tried to keep everything that you get from the best of British independent schooling. So the kind of focus on really high quality academics, but alongside clubs, societies, elective courses, a house system, the kind of bells and whistles British education that I think has become famous both in the UK but also internationally. For us it was a question of how do you package that into an online format so that students can access from their homes wherever they are in the world. It took a long time to kind of think that all through and work that all out, but we were really delighted with both the academic performance of Harrow School Online. We outdid Harrow in the A-level results every year we ran, which was always a pleasure.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, I think that just proved the pedagogical model was working really robustly, because I think that was the one thing that was quite different, actually. The clubs, the societies, the house, there was a lot of similarities with the Harrow School, but we were quite different in the way we delivered the education. We used flipped learning. We put an emphasis on students working through lessons independently before they then went to a live lesson with a teacher. And with A-levels, we had like 60% independent work, about 40% of time in lessons with a teacher, which is very different to a traditional model where most of the time you're supervised when you're working. We had a coaching ethos where students work one-to-one with a coach every week, focus on teaching metacognition, building students into independent learners. And that's obviously quite a risk, isn't it? Because then you're putting a bit more trust and responsibility on your students. So it was a real relief, to be quite honest, when we got the first set of exam results back, and the most common grade for us was A star at A-level. So, I mean, that really, all of that work at Harrow cemented what we're doing at Highgrove, because when Harrow School got closed by its owners, Pearson rather than Harrow, myself and the team felt that it was an absolutely cracking school delivering something that wasn't available elsewhere, hence wanting to continue the provision through Highgrove.
Okay. From conversations we've had, I mean, the exam results are outstanding, but it was the soft skills and the additional stuff, the community work highlights, the impact. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I think the exam results are outstanding because of the soft skills. We're teaching kids how to learn. We're teaching them how to learn independently, how to be kind of good at time management, task management, avoiding procrastination. We actually teach all of those things kind of explicitly on a skills and mindset course, which is delivered by our coaches. That's a talk or so. It involves kids working through self-study lessons, going to lessons with a teacher, discussing whatever subject they've looked at. So if it's something like managing your time, people will share their advice, their tips, their difficulties. And then it's run by the coaches. So the coaches also work one-to-one with students if they're finding that's a blocker to their learning. But all of that work on metacognitive skills underlies the academic skills, because if you teach students to be really strong independent learners, then that way they're having to do a lot of, with their independent work, they're having to do a lot of thinking as they go through those courses. It's probably a little bit more difficult, to be honest, than having something gently explained by a teacher. Or your cognitive load is higher, but your retention of information is also higher because you're having to work harder to learn. You get very good at revision, which is also helpful for us because obviously revision, Easter holidays coming up is a time where our students are really quite well equipped to go through that independent study period.
It sounds a weird question, this, but how do you make sure your learners are happy? Because I've seen the curriculum review, I've seen the white paper, and there seems to be this huge, elephant in the room where the people empowered choose not to address the fact that we've got 1.5 million kids persistently absent, or whatever it is, 1.4 million on the home elective education. How do you have a specific? Does it come through the interactions with your staff, or do you model it? Do you track it in another way? How do you keep on top of that?
Yeah, I mean, we do. We track it. We ask our students, how are they? Are they happy? How are they building friendships in the school? What do they think about their school? What do they think about their teachers? How many of them would recommend us as a school? Our Net Promoter Score, which I know isn't much used in education, but is a metric used quite commonly outside of education, where you ask students, would you recommend our school to other people? The average out of 10 was 9.3 out of 10, and that gives us I think it was a Net Promoter Score of 70, which is in the kind of world-class bracket in terms of that particular metric. We're often actually on the receiving end of students who've left other schools because they've not been very happy. So it can be a little bit of a journey for our students to find joy in education again. I mean, I think for many of our students, there's often that innate joy in learning, but there's also the peer support of their community is really important. Those relationships that students forge with others is absolutely key, both in giving them a support network, a group of friends. And we're quite kind of proactive about planning opportunities for students to form friendships. So we have a house system where there's a lot of inter-house competitions. I sometimes worry about how much time kids spend on like the Christmas music video competition, for example, as opposed to revising for their mocks, which come at about the same time. And then there are plenty of chances to meet up as well in person. We run events and trips. We've got a speech day in Oxford University at the end of the school year in summer. Those occasions become really joyous because if you've built those friendships online and then you get to meet people in person, it can be a really awesome opportunity for kids. I mean, well-being and happiness underpins everything. If you don't have that, and you don't have the kids who are kind of well, safe, happy, they're not going to learn. You need that in place first.
Just a follow-up question, Heather, because your provision, and you strike me as someone who's aspiring for quality, which means your numbers on roll are smaller and you're not out there pushing huge numbers. What and you reference taking kids from other schools that haven't it hasn't worked out for them, whether it's physical or elsewhere. What are your criteria for taking children, and what do they have to do to be accepted within that? You don't want to grow too fast. You want to keep it high quality and make sure you've got the right ratios and things.
Yeah, I mean, we're quite unusual in that we're a selective online school, which means we will run some kind of assessment with students before they join the school. And typically that will include doing some kind of academic assessment to check that they wouldn't feel out of their depth on whichever course we're putting them into. And for some of our kids, starting off their experience with an academic assessment is not the right route forwards. Instead, it would be a discussion, a meeting with subject teachers to check for fit for the course. But we're not a kind of yes/no school. If we don't think a student would be the right fit for one of the courses, we'll offer alternatives. So I always think we're very rigid in the UK about what age you are in each different year group. And that's not the same internationally, because we have quite a few international students in our school. We've actually got quite a range of kids. It tends to be like 1 year below, 1 year above, plus the standard year within any given year group. So sometimes we'd say to a student, well, we think really you're better off going back to start year 9 again, or joining the year 9 course midway through, rather than jumping into year 10 and putting a lot of pressure on yourself.
So you have a stage, not age.
Yeah, and also a mixed aspect. So it might be that in some subjects, you would be right for accelerating a year, and in other subjects, you might want to stick to the year group that is appropriate for your age. You might need to start at a lower point in other subjects. So we actually have a mixed approach, subject by subject. Or we take students onto one-to-one provision. What we're offering on the group classes isn't a good fit for students. My feeling is that rather than trying to make a student fit a standard provision, really we should be trying to make sure the provision we're offering the student fits their needs. And we can do that far more easily as an online school than perhaps would be possible in a face-to-face school with the timetabling restrictions.
Heather, could I jump in? I've been listening intently, and I know it's a particular area of passion. So there's lots that resonates for me. I still get invitations back to West House from my school in Cambridge over many years. And I'm also wear quite a few different hats. So I chair a local authority, a school originally, then I've chaired my multi-academy trust.
Yeah.
And work with schools across different statuses. I also sit on the advisory board of a virtual school. So a kind of a mixed thing. I get a lot of the things that you share in the way that we don't want a one-size-fits-all system, and we absolutely want providers that have the ability to design the right course around the child, that flexibility. How do you see the growth in virtual schools, for want of a better term, whether we call them virtual, hybrid, or any other term? We know ultimately it's about a more flexible provision. How do you see that aligning with the mainstream aspirations of the Department for Education?
So my hope is that the work that's being done in the online educational space at the moment will have a massive impact on mainstream education over the next decade. Because the mainstream schooling does tend to have a very fixed way of educating, which involves large groups of people in a class, the same amount of
back to 1870
time.
here, aren't we, Heather?
Yeah. And it's an approach that does work for many kids, but not for all kids. And I think that what we're finding more and more is that families are voting with their feet and moving kids onto online schooling or alternative provision when they're looking for flexibility. But some of the most exciting conversations we're having at the moment are about hybrid schools, for example, where you have the option to be at a fixed school location, a slightly more flexible basis. Because if parts of your education are offered online, then that means that those aspects of your education can be taken wherever you are. So I think actually we're slightly slower to adapt to this in the UK than internationally.
Agreed.
I think that's the weight of tradition.
You see, the
in
hybrid
the
is
UK.
allowing you to have more capacity, Heather. Sorry, officer.
Yeah.
Because the idea when you talk about hybrid is that rather than having a school facility that allows 400 children, if you have a hybrid model where they spend 1 or 2 days a week in school, you can have a cohort of 600. In essence, you can scale with your teacher experience.
Yeah, I mean, there is a capacity advantage to offering hybrid provision, but we ultimately work on the same ratios, teacher to student ratios, as a traditional school does. We just repurpose time differently. So, for example, at A level, we have 2 fixed level lessons per week with a teacher. We have 5 self-study lessons per week that students work through independently, but we also have one-to-one time available from the teacher. So if a student needs additional support, they need extra help with a particular subject, a particular unit within that subject, they can go and see their teacher one-to-one, which gives a much more flexible amount of input time for each student. Our students describe it as very efficient. They get as much support as they need. They can work as quickly or as slowly as they need through the independent study lessons, but they also get the support from a teacher. Now, there's no reason that approach can't work in a physical school as well. The difficulty actually with an online only model is the independent study work, because it can be quite a big ask to get students to sit down and work through those lessons without somebody in the room with them, giving them a little prod at times, giving them the support. Now, with a hybrid model, if your teaching is online but your independent study work is with the support of others within a local setting, it's the best of both worlds. You don't have quite the same heavy lift in getting the independent work done, but you have the flexibility of provision that you get from the online taught delivery.
Would you say that, through your experience of physical school and online school and what we just talked about there, that one-to-one time for students is the biggest advantage for what you can provide compared to a traditional school, Victorian, as I often refer to it as? Is that quality one-to-one time the biggest positive?
So it definitely is a huge positive. Having said that, some students don't take advantage of it at all. You get some students who are very happy going through their entire GCSE or A-level with very minimal one-to-one support from teachers and coming out at the other end with absolutely cracking results. It's probably, to be honest, the coaching support, the one-to-one time from coaches, that's more important than the one-to-one support from teachers. Because
that's interesting.
Yeah, the coaches help with your whole mindset, your whole approach to learning, and that's really the most significant change that we're making to students, that we're giving them responsibility for their own learning in a way that currently most face-to-face schools don't give to their students, which means there is quite a mindset change. It's an amazing thing to give students in the long term, because when our kids leave us and go on to university, they say they just feel streets ahead of their peers because they already know how to manage their time. They know how to work independently. They're very proactive, quite good at reaching out if they need support, because they're used to, booking office hours with their teachers when they need to. But it's the coaching that's the main thing that helps students with that mindset change and to develop the independent study skills that are so important for that type of approach.
But what you're saying there is also straight back round to the well-being aspect, isn't it? That coaching is keeping them happy and centred, which is huge.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So,
and coordinating support for students who need it, because sometimes, like some of the students who join us come having experienced relatively traumatic school experiences prior to joining an online school. There does need to be very strong coordination of the teaching and liaison with parents and with our SEND code, just to make sure that everything that we're providing for that student really meets what they need at that particular time.
Completely off topic, but sort of on topic question. Obviously, there's a recognition that for some families, following that journey of their child going to an independent school allows them to have a broader education curriculum delivery for their child. As I said, I hold my hand up on that journey. Do you see the government's efforts to, I'm going to say it, penalise the independent sector, for want of a better term, whether we agree or not? But do you see that is a catalyst for some parents looking and saying, actually, your model is both more flexible but also more financially practical for them to still allow their child to have a more tailored education?
Yeah, we have noticed a increase in families from the independent sector who sometimes it's because their school's closed. They've literally lost their local provision and they are looking for an alternative that will work for them. And I think sometimes families who perhaps might have moved across to independent education are looking at alternatives. I think that's particularly the case, to be honest, for kids who perhaps previously would have gone into boarding school because the families are quite globally mobile for mum or dad's work, and actually being able to travel as a family and take your education with you and have that continuity of education is a really awesome thing to have. I think boarding is perhaps slightly falling out of fashion with families who prefer to stay slightly closer together rather than send
But
the kids off.
isn't this a model that perhaps allows to sort of blur that traditional pathway of where your children may and families may choose to send their children and allow for a more mixed cohort?
Yeah, totally. We have I love the kids that we have at Highgrove. They're just awesome because it's such a mix. I mean, we have some high net worth, ultra high net worth families who are looking at online schooling as a means to allow their children to travel with the family as they move between countries. We have some elite athletes in the school. We have some families who come from homeschooling backgrounds who want a little bit more support with GCSEs or A levels as you move up through the years with homeschooling. And if your ambitions kind of geared towards a top university placement, it can be helpful having that structure and support. We also have quite a few kids who've joined us from the state system, sometimes because the local school, if you have a school of 1,000 kids, however accommodating that school is to the needs of students who feel overwhelmed by the sensory overload of being in an environment with 1,000 other kids, it's very difficult to make meaningful accommodations that make that child feel perfectly comfortable in that environment. Some kids just work much better in smaller social settings.
I think that's a fair comment, although each of our secondary schools within my MAT are 1,500 students. You find ways to make as many accommodations as you can, but I think, like all these things, you can still come full circle to recognising that a one-size-fits-all education system is never going to work, and we need that difference. And I asked the question because whilst I respect and feel there's a good place for the independent sector, I also aspirationally want to make sure that ultimately there's the same offer afforded to every child, and we can have we can deliver both a physical, a hybrid, and a virtual education to meet the different needs of families and do it. Your points are interesting because also there are those technology, the way you do things allow efficiencies, but that often can have a brackets of affordability as well, making the offer sustainable, more affordable for families, which does kind of tick the box in terms of accessibility, perhaps.
Yeah, well, one of the most exciting projects we've got on in the UK at the moment is with Matt, with EACT. I think we're working with 11 of their secondary schools, doing exam masterclasses with our A-level teachers who are exam specialists. The idea is, there's 250 kids that we're supporting, with the idea of moving them up from C to a B, or possibly even an A, by honing their exam technique. It's the kind of teaching that I think is quite common in the independent sector, that real focus on how do you maximize your grade based on your current knowledge and understanding by really honing exam technique. Now, I'm sure within that Academy Trust, there are some excellent teachers. Having an outside voice from somebody who's external, and the kids kind of feel like they trust that voice because they're an examiner, it can be really useful to, just in the run up to exams, to give students that extra boost. And the exciting thing about that project is we're not doing it in every subject. So we'll be able to have a look at the results and see if it's genuinely made a difference to outcomes.
That's a good one on joining the dots, Matt, as well, because I think Trust Board members at EACT include guests on this show, Mark Martin and Basit Siddiqui, so
Right.
who've all shared their insights as part of our conversations.
Yeah. Just before I ask about India, Heather, my thing is soft skills, and I hate the word soft skills and soft.
Power skills, Matt.
Power skills, life skills, yeah. Somebody still needs to come up with a term that sticks, don't they? When you evaluate or when you get feedback from your learners about your curriculum offer, if you like, and your soft skills offer, do any actually say, "Oh, I love the soft skills. I want to pursue that a bit further next year," or is it what's the balance, if there is one?
Yeah, I mean, they don't have a choice. All of our full-time students are on skills and mindset courses in every year, but the feedback from those courses is really positive. And when we ask students about flipped learning, and because of course you need the independent study skills in order to be able to access flipped learning, it's overwhelmingly positive. The kids like it. I think, I mean, the questionnaire results all show really positive feedback for both skills and mindset, for coaching, for flipped learning. When you actually speak to the kids and you ask them about it, they appreciate being given more responsibility for their learning. They feel like they're treated not like grown-ups, but like they're capable of taking on responsibility. And in general, I think they like the fact that they have that. It's more freedom, it's more flexibility, but it is also like on them ultimately to do the work, and they rise to that, is what we've seen.
Interesting, right? Thank you. So India, you spent a lot of time in your spare time when you've got a minute. You've been working with a school in India, which you could have picked, or you could have worked with Scotland or Wales. Or even popped across the channel, but why in India, and how's it going? What are you doing?
Yeah, I'm so excited about this project. So this is, I think the reason for how and why in India is about the demographics. India is a really young country that's got a real bulge in their youth population, and they're looking to kind of make the most out of that. But you can't do that without educating people well. And the school we're working with is in a remote area of India. It's somewhere. It's Uttar Pradesh is the state, so it's the poorest state in India. It's quite agricultural, and they're looking to kind of leapfrog economic growth by getting really good education into the region. sending kids off to great universities across the world. And also they've got, as well as that partnering with us, they've got a partnership with the Royal Agricultural University and the University of Reading to deliver degree courses in situ. And the idea is that the education that you're providing these young people is going to transform the region over the next couple of decades. And really excited to be part of that project.
We've come across this in other podcasts and speaking to people, haven't we, that in India there seems to be recognition at government level, then down to states, I think, that they actually want to think long term and put in the opportunity and the education, including digital literacy, maths, English and things. I've never heard it described as a new young country, did you say before? I've never heard that. But yeah, it all matches in.
I mean, I think about 70% of the country is under 35. Very different demographically to the UK, which is a much older country. And education is really important to the India as a whole, to the Indian government. It can be difficult, though, to get really good quality educators, particularly if you're offering GCSEs and A-levels into a relatively remote area of the country. And this is one of the things that international schools often struggle with. It's the quality of teaching staff that you can employ locally and the continuity of that staff, because I think people often kind of come and do a year or two, move on. And so working with a hybrid setup means that you get the best of UK teaching, but with the local support, the local provision. The local team will be running the sports and the clubs and the societies, and our teachers will be going out there quite often, which they're all incredibly excited about, to do little stints teaching out there, because actually when you work remotely, you don't have to be in the UK to do that.
Saw your ears prick up there, Matt. I think he'd be volunteering any second, Heather.
10 degrees, it's good for me. Anything above 10 degrees, I don't work well in. I think it's brilliant.
And the idea for us in the long term, actually, is that we develop hybrid partnerships like this across the world, and that with local partners, we'll be providing the academic provision. The local partner will be providing the school, the local provision, the local support. And it would be absolutely awesome for those kids to be able to travel between schools in different countries, for our online school kids to be able to go and stay in different schools. It's just, I think one of the things that it would be really positive for the world as a whole is for international collaboration amongst our young people to start really early, for people to build those friendships, those relationships, which you get if you're actually studying alongside each other in an elective course, or going to stay with each other on study holidays.
Love that. Matt, I'm really conscious of time. We've run over our normal thing, but I'm glad we have done, because it's really interesting. No, don't apologise. I think
one last thing
on this is learning. But Matt, yes, far away.
I'd just like to know one last thing, Heather. If you doing what you're doing and seeing what the current education system in England is, and talk about what you're talking about there in terms of like almost normalising this international connections between children, what's one thing that you'd like to see change dramatically in the UK linked to what you're doing? Or in England, sorry, not in the UK.
Yeah, okay. It's one big thing. I'd love to see a voucher system in place for education in the UK, because that would give the chance for families to have a little bit more choice about what their provision looks like, would be able to split provision where it's needed or useful for them, and I think would ultimately improve the quality of all of the education in the UK, as we we kind of all collaborate and learn from each other and what each other are doing. At the moment,
We've got
it's quite
two people here that
restrictive.
agree with you.
Yeah.
So we're fully on board with that, Heather.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, ultimately, choice has got to be at the heart of any good reform of the education system.
Choice and
Yeah.
options, definitely.
I
Yeah.
think that's a really good point to add
Thank you.
into the mix.
Mm.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, particularly
Thank you very
at the
much.
weekend. Although when you're listening to this, it might be Monday, Tuesday, or whatever. If anybody wants to find out more about your offer and your schools, where could they head to, Heather?
Yeah, so highgroveeducation.com is our website. It's mostly, there's lots of information for families looking at provision, for schools looking at provision. Probably emailing me is easier, and my
And by the
email's on
sounds
the
of it,
website.
maybe if you're a trust leader, maybe as a trust leader, it's worth reaching out to and having a conversation.
Yeah, totally. I mean, one of the things we're really excited about in the UK is being able to help trusts where there is a real use case for delivering education remotely. So yeah, please do reach out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.